Hello, welcome. I'm Laura Day. I'm going to give us all a few minutes to get on. In the meantime, those of you who are familiar with intuition, please feel free to put some questions in the Q&A or in the chat just to make sure I address them by the end of our session. So I'm just going to give people a couple minutes. And if anybody who's already here has some questions before we do a formal intro, feel free to put them in either the Q&A or the chat box. And I always love to use all the time that we have. I am speaking to you from Tribeca in New York City. I know for many of you, it is now evening. Okay. So as people are still signing on, feel free to say hello or to put a question in chat or in the Q&A, although I've never used the Q&A before, so chat might be better. Hello from Mexico, I see. Hello from Switzerland, from Dubai. Hello, everybody. So any questions that you have about intuition, just as we're waiting for people to get on, feel free to ask. I am going to focus this presentation on using intuition in very practical ways in business and your life, and one particular intuitive skill, which is mediumship. But do I have any exercises to improve intuition? Well, I have written 6 books on the topic, but because we are all innately intuitive, really the best way to improve intuition is to apply it to your daily needs, because then not only are you using it and reawakening a skill that is always a part of you, but you're also, because it's addressing daily needs, you're also doing it in a way that verifies it. So again, I'm going to give people a few minutes to sign on. I see people are still signing on, and then we're going to begin. And we are going to be doing exercises. I have been teaching intuition for 40 years. And when back in the early 80s, I used to explain how I perceived intuition as working and realized that people are stuck in beliefs often, and those beliefs put blinders on. So I very quickly, in my early 20s, shifted to doing exercises with people, having them apply their own intuition. Because when you're doing something and it's accurate, it's really undeniable and it becomes useful to you. You know, anything that you have to believe in is something that may or may not work. Maybe what works is your belief. So the way that I train intuition is, how do we get data that we can then prove or disprove? And of course, for reasons we'll discuss, it's just as important to be able to disprove your data as it is to prove it. Is intuition something that can be controlled? And once again, I'm just going to give people a few more minutes to sign on. Controlled is an interesting word. That's like saying, is intellect something that can be controlled? Well, no, because when you're curious, it moves. Are emotions something that can be controlled? Well, no, but we can train, target, and direct our perceptions, whether it's intellect, emotion, expression of those perceptions, or intuition. And that's part of what we're going to be doing today. Actually, with intuition, one of the most important skills to learn isn't just how to expand your perceptions, but actually how to have a filter. Because what we found in researching the human mind is that we are very porous, and that porosity sometimes gets us confused. We experience other people's feelings and points of view. So I am going to formally begin, and people who come in late will just have to jump in. My name is Laura Day, and I'm what I call a practicing intuitive. I began my intuitive practice in the early 80s. Back in the early 80s, when many of you weren't even born yet, the universities and the militaries of various countries were very interested in what were the extended capacities of the human mind. So what was the human mind actually able to perceive, and what were the limits? Much of the research focused on things such as remote viewing, which is being able to view and document a distant location without having seen it visually. Much of it was focused on the defense uses of intuition, and I'll describe the term in a minute. So I was a test subject. I did not come into intuition through spirituality. I came into intuition through science and through really not having a belief in intuition, but having an experience in my daily life of being able to perceive things in ways that then, when I got into this group of testing programs, I realized were different. The downside of coming to intuition that way is I didn't have the esoteric language, the spiritual language, so to speak, to express what it was that I was perceiving, or really to apply it to personal growth. The upside was that it was evidence-based, it was data-based. So for example, and this is in my first book, Practical Intuition, one of the tests was to say what was inside a closed box, or to take a number of a patient file and go through their body remotely, or with simply map coordinates describing what was at a remote location. And these things were proven or disproven. I was in my early 20s at the time, and I was a test subject on the condition of anonymity, because of course, when you're in your early 20s, you certainly don't want to be known as a weirdo. One of these recorded sessions was televised, and I had instant interest from the public in something I didn't even have a name for. That was 40 years ago. And since then, I have, by writing 6 books and by working with various organizations, I've really tried to bring this incredible ability that we all have into the mainstream of business, of finance, of medicine, of research. I make my living by predicting the future for companies. I train students to do the same, to be what I call practicing intuitives for various, mostly business uses and research. Now there is, in the early 80s, there was some research on what were called the extended capacities of perception. So how can the average person know what someone else is thinking, view a remote location, have an effect on matter at a distance, for example, affect a virus or the temperature of water or a compass at a distance? What are our, in a sense, energetic electrical capacities in terms of both receiving information and sending it? Back when I began, there was a lot of research on telepathy. For example, Maimonides Medical Center in the 50s did research on dream telepathy, where someone in a remote location would send an image, and in another location, someone would go to sleep, and when they woke up, they would design the image that was sent. So there was a lot of convincing evidence for the existence of these abilities. The reason you don't hear about that evidence, and there's a lot more now, and you can go on things like PubMed and see some of the research, but I'm going to read you some of the titles of the research, and you'll see why you don't always see them. A meta-analysis of 90 experiments on the anomalous anticipation of random events. What it's saying is how we can tell the future even when something is random. Or the electrophysiology of intuition, pre-stimulus responses in group and individual participants using a roulette paradigm. So a lot of the research on intuition would be things like a computer would generate randomly an image, and the test subjects would predict and design the image that the computer would randomly generate. So again, this intuition is not a belief. Your precognition, telepathy, mediumship, which we'll be doing today, these are not beliefs. These are things that have been verified and abilities that we all have. The question now in this century, and I was born in the last one, is no longer does this exist, but how do we use it productively in our lives, and how do we defend against it? Now, intuition is a multi-spoked umbrella, and I'm just going to give you some of the parts of your intuitive physiology. Telepathy is the ability to send impressions mind to mind, even to a stranger, even over a remote location. Remote viewing is the ability to view, to see, to experience a remote location. Astral projection is the ability to physically experience and even be seen in that location. The precognition is the ability to tell the future, and there's an enormous body of research on precognition. Healing is the ability to direct your energy with focus and attention to affect physical matter, also in vicinity or at a distance. But today, because it is actually the easiest intuitive ability in that it requires no interpretation, we are going to focus on mediumship. And mediumship, in popular language, is the ability to experience somebody or something who has died or is not in your physical reality. But mediumship, when you apply it to your life or business, has a different meaning, although you can use it for all kinds of esoteric uses as well. I want to stick to the ones today that you can prove, and then you can have a field day with them later. Mediumship is your ability to become what it is you want to know something about. So, for example, mediumship is your ability to experience another person from their point of view. Mediumship is your ability to experience a company, for example, as the company experiences itself in its many parts. Whereas most intuitive practice really demands perspective and detachment, that you have a distance so you can observe it and collect data about it. Mediumship is really a direct experience of what it is you want to know more about. Now, we are all born as natural mediums. When you are a little baby, you have no ability to differentiate between self and other. You know, you are everything around you. Everything around you is you. So mediumship is actually something that's very easy for people to do, because you are what you want to know about. There is no need to define it, describe it, or have perspective about it. So whereas, you know, spirituality is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and you can certainly use all of these skills in a spiritual way. Really, where these skills are so helpful for you is getting the information that you need to lead a more effective life. Now, before we work with using mediumship to get information about the conditions we want to know more about, I'd like to invite you to do a mediumship cleanse. One of the things that I and many other people have discovered in 40 years of research is that even when we don't want to experience other people, we do. We experience people close to us. Also, when our attention is on someone or something else, we tend to experience it without being aware of it. Now, why aren't we aware of these experiences? because the mind and your very multidimensional inner functioning is multidimensional, is already packed with thoughts, ideas, memories, feelings, reactions, sensations. So just like when you want to effectuate an intellectual exercise, you need to be in a certain state. When you want to be more aware of your intuition, you need to learn to find it and to separate it out from the soup of all your other experience. So from here on in, I will be addressing your questions, but I'm going to show you how to apply your mediumship to things you need to have more mastery in your life. And I'm going to start with how you take possession of the perceptive organism that is you, so you can even perceive what it is you need, the data, the information that you need. So the first step to doing that is to notice what doesn't feel like you. Now, the first time you do this, this may be very hard to do because you are a collection of everything and everyone you're connected to. The best exercise to become less of a medium, so to have more clarity, is mindfulness. And mindfulness, we overcomplicate things with words. Mindfulness is simply you're bringing your attention without being meditative, without going Zen, bringing your attention to this moment. Look around you. What are you seeing? What are you tasting? What are you smelling? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? What is it to be you in this point in space-time, or as we say, in this moment? So what is it to be you right now, and allow yourself that experience? And as you experience being mindful in this moment, notice who else you may be experiencing, that as you experience yourself more fully, you're able to move out of you. Why is this important? Because your inadvertent mediumship often can cause you to be hungry when someone else who you're connected to is hungry, but you aren't. Not good for your body. It makes depression and anxiety communicable diseases because you experience what's free floating around you, especially with those people who you're connected to. So the first step to using your mediumship in a healthy, effective way in your life is to be mindful, is to as fully as possible inhabit yourself, and to notice. So intellect can help intuition to notice who and what moves aside when you fully inhabit yourself. So who else, what else was in you? So I'm going to take a moment to let you do that. And some of you are posting some very interesting questions, but I want to take you through the experience of very simply using mediumship first. So we start with mindfulness, and really that's how you start any intuitive exercise, because otherwise your intuitive data and your thinking, feeling, experiencing data gets all mixed up. So take another moment to just be mindful. And as you are, notice, what is it, who is it that you want to know more about in this moment? So let's all pick what we call a target. What is it that we're going to use mediumship to know more about? Who is it? Just pick one, because once again, we don't want to mishmash a lot of information together. The more we compartmentalize, the easier it is to notice what is intuitive data and to document it, and then later to be able to verify or disprove it, which is very, very important. Although I love the intuitive uses of intuition, the esoteric spiritual uses of intuition, most of them you can't prove. And one of the things that half a century of research has shown us is that when you can prove intuition, you're able to use it. When you're able to verify the data, you can actually apply it. And for example, being able to know that with a good degree of accuracy, and anyone who tells you they're perfect, run, don't walk away from, but with a fair degree of accuracy, you can predict certain things in the future. It allows you to prepare in the present, the only time you can actually make a difference, to do something differently to get a better outcome. So now, from your mindfulness, you've picked a situation, a person, a thing that you want to understand from their point of view. And once again, this is not the true objective point of view. This is experiencing something from its own point of view. So I am going to count to 3 and say begin. And when I say begin, I want you to pretend, and pretend is a way of doing something that you actually can do, but you didn't know you can do. I want you to pretend that you are that person or that thing or that company or that market. I want you to literally become it. Pretend you are it. Now, what does that mean? We haven't begun yet. Follow my instructions. What that means is any experience you speak of from the I. So if I'm the price of oil, I might say, well, this is how I feel about myself. And I feel like I'm going in this direction, and I'm really disappointed in this geographic area. So you speak as the voice of whatever it is or whomever it is you have become. You might want to take some notes while you're doing this. And if you're alone, you may want to do it out loud so you can actually hear yourself. There's something about either writing something down or doing it aloud that helps separate it from your imagination and your feelings and your beliefs and thoughts and intellect from all of those other processes. So before we start this exercise, I want to see in chat or in Q&A if anybody has any questions about how to do this exercise. So for example, if I were your target, when I said begin, you would become me. And you wouldn't think, what is it like to be Laura? You would assume you are Laura. And then you would notice and you would speak from Laura about what's going on with you. How are you feeling? Where are you? So any questions before we begin? Okay. When I start you in this exercise, I want you to document what it is you're noticing, not just internally, but around you when you're that person or that organization. I want you to document in as much detail as possible. Okay, I'm going to give you a minute or two to do this. And once again, you don't have to focus. Assume you become the object of inquiry. Assume you become your target. Don't filter. And there's a question about asking energetically permission from the target. My thoughts are no, not necessary. Why? Because we're doing this subconsciously all of the time. We are in and out of everyone and everything all of the time. We don't need to ask just because we're doing it consciously. But once again, your morality around how you use your energy is really an individual choice. So when I say begin, you're going to become the object of inquiry and you're going to speak or write just about what it is you're experiencing. Let yourself be surprised. Don't think it, notice it. 1, 2, 3, begin. And you're welcome to write things in comments as you do. And yes, you assume you are that person and you speak from the I, and allow yourself to get as much detail as you can, because often you can prove or disprove it. And we'll speak about how. Even my voice becomes part of your experience of that person. Notice what you're concerned about as that company or person. Notice how you feel. Notice what's around you. Notice what's changed. Notice what you're preoccupied with. Notice what's working. Notice what's not working. And now stop. And the way you stop, and it is very important to learn how to do this, is you go back to your experience of you, your mindfulness. The simple task, the simple repetitive exercise of using your senses to get data and then reintegrating your senses into your own experience is the most effective psychic self-defense you can have. So let me look at, so when someone says something like nothing is coming, only a pain in my gut, that's impossible because you are always experiencing so many things at once. That may be what you're focusing on, but you know, whenever my students in a workshop say I'm not getting anything, I pinch them because you're always getting a lot. It's that we've been trained to only notice certain things, which is why often you are not benefiting from all of the intuitive data you receive. Again, I train people not to speak eternal truths. I train people to do things like predict the market, to look at competition for a product they're coming out with, see what's wrong with a real estate property or investment. You know, I train people to use this, and I was trained to use it in verifiable ways. And you are always experiencing things. It's often hard to allow the fullness of that experience in doing something new. It's kind of a big risk. But I'll bet some of you got some things that surprised you. And one of the ways we can prove our mediumship is if you did someone. Often what happens is that person will call you because they experience you as you're experiencing them. But also, sometimes you can check out your facts. Did this person have peanut butter and jelly for lunch? Was that what you were tasting? Did you feel a heaviness on their arm like a cast? Well, you may find out they broke their arm last week. Especially when you document your perceptions, what you'll find is that you can verify many of those perceptions. Now, why is that helpful? Certainly when you're selling a skill, that's helpful because you want to be able to show your hit or accuracy rate. But it's also helpful because your subconscious, so your operating system, which makes 87% of your decisions before your conscious mind is aware of them. So your operating system uses things that you have historically deemed useful. Otherwise, your subconscious represses the information. Not useful or overwhelming, let's repress that. Too much going on. When you document and prove that this data is not only accurate and useful, and when you do it in a regular way, what happens is that your subconscious, when it needs information, begins to tap into your senses in this new way and provide this data. So you may not, walking out on a sunny day, hear, bring an umbrella. However, as you walk out the door, you may grab an umbrella because your subconscious has decided that this predictive data is useful. So I want to see, Jeffrey is saying, can we pretend to be our future self? You jumped ahead of me because one of the wonderful, I think that a therapeutic use of mediumship is to both be your future and past self. So without remembering, say, I am going to be me. And by the way, it's uncanny how specifically you become a target. So you can say, okay, I'm going to be me October 10th, 1998. And then simply report. Don't wait to feel like you're you then, because discernment is counterintuitive, but simply report. And then you may actually be able to verify some of that. Now, one of the things with verifying your information with the past is you don't know how much is memory that you're just not aware that you stored. But when you use mediumship in the future, and there's a tricky way to do this, which I'll tell you about in a moment, whether it's with yourself or with a company or an investment, when you do mediumship in the future, it's really important to pick a precise date, because otherwise it becomes a very unfocused, airy process. So for example, August 10th, 2024. Let's all do this. Become you. August 10th, 2024. Once again, those of you who are thinking it, forget thinking it. Be in. What are you smelling, tasting, seeing, hearing, feeling, noticing? And August 10th, 2024, what are you thinking? And I would take really good notes. So just let's do this. And do this as you're listening. Do this as you're participating. Once again, you are a medium all of the time. You are used to being a medium while doing other things. You're used to being you and the object of inquiry, whether it's a person or a situation or a company. You're used to doing that all the time. Those of you who are a company, you are this company, August 10th, 2024. What do you notice about you? What's been happening the last few years? Have you grown? Are you still in business? What parts of you are functioning and not functioning? Experience yourself and report. And once again, the more you document your reporting, the more you can take this ability out of belief and make it into a useful skill, because of course, there is a yardstick for it, and that yardstick is your accuracy. Don't expect to be 100%. Not, there's so much just simply because we interpret our experiences differently. I may find a company successful because my expectations are lower than yours. The important thing when doing an intuitive exercise is to document, and then especially with precognition, as time goes on, it becomes useful. But let it be you now, August 10th, 2024. What's going on? Who's around you? Look around. Don't do this in your head. Notice, how are you feeling? Oh my goodness. What's happening? Is there anything surprising? Okay, now we're going to do this with different things because I'm going to respond to your questions. But even when you are yourself at another time or place, it's really important to come back to yourself now, because again, that's the way the more slippery, dangerous parts of mediumship. So experiencing the needs, desires, feelings of others inadvertently, that's the way you cleanse your palate. And again, experiencing, a lot of things like pain syndromes, weight, anxiety, depression, a lot of those things are actually inadvertent mediumship. That's why you often see a skinny person with a heavy person, because the heavy person is eating for the skinny person, is taking over that hunger. I used to get annoyed with my husband. I'd say, you get pissed off and I blow up. No, you need to own your own stuff, and I need to have much better boundaries. There's some really great questions here. One is, so in essence, we are manifesting the connection with our intentions. Absolutely not. First of all, let's take the word manifesting, because I hate when we magicalize words. Manifesting simply means making something happen. mediumship is not making something happen. It's perceiving what is happening. It's perceiving what will happen. And there's a completely different process for actually changing what will happen, or even changing your experience of the now. So it really isn't. It's in a sense what mediumship, when you study it, shows you, especially when you're doing the future, is that mediumship shows you that there is a set future. Although there are many possibilities for change, which we can only employ in the present. There was a very interesting study done about 30 years ago on schizophrenics. And in this study, using hypnosis, they took the person back to their first psychotic episode, and they changed the experience of that episode. And what they found is that they could ameliorate the current symptoms by having that person be who they were, but experience that shift differently. So you can not only change your future with mediumship, adapt your experience of the present to be better, more manageable, or have you be more effective, but you can also change the past, and once again, in ways you can measure and verify. The other question we have here is someone saying that in the morning they're able to get their spirit guides, or I'm going to translate that into their inner wisdom, outer wisdom, intuitively, their creativity, but during the day they can't. In the morning and at night, we're regressed. So our executive function, our frontal lobe, is dampered down. So our routines, our beliefs, our structure is softened. And because most of us don't integrate intuition into our structure, when we're regressed, we tend to be more intuitive. Unfortunately, we also tend to be more emotional and less functional. So we often can't do that much with our intuition, but it is a great time to do things like automatic writing, where you ask yourself a question and then you just let the writing happen, because your frontal lobe doesn't say, oh no, you can't be doing this. This doesn't exist. You're too regressed for that. So let's see if there are any other questions before we move on. Okay, so I am going to continue. How can I make a person I am into to contact me again after 1 month? Well, that's a very rigid question. You can't, it's like, how can I make my husband pick up his socks? You can't make somebody do anything. You can create conditions that give you a good chance of getting what it is you want. So to do that through mediumship, it's something that I actually call body heat telepathy. It's in my book, How to Rule the World from Your Couch. But it's actually a mediumship exercise. So I want to take you all through this, because I want each individual question to help. I want to give you a bunch of exercises that you can play with when we're not here doing this together. So pick someone whose behavior you would like to have change in some way, whether you would like this person to contact you, or you would like to offer them comfort or make a connection with them somehow. So everybody take a moment to pick your target. And I'm again going to go through these questions. Okay, and those of you who are listening to this on replay, you can do this just as effectively. And I would suggest you pause and go get something to either record your voice or do it on your phone, or something to write with, because it is your imagination until you can prove that what it is you were experiencing was actually happening. So I cannot tell you enough how important it is to document and verify your perceptions whenever you can. Okay, so now you have the person you want to influence. Let's go back and let's do that first exercise. And that first exercise is, I'm going to count from 1 to 3 and say begin. And when I say begin, anything that you perceive in any way, assume the other person is perceiving. And I'm going to ask some questions of you as the other person. So 1, 2, 3, begin. Assume you are the person who you have chosen to be your target. And now notice, just take a moment and sit back. Don't focus or concentrate. Don't go Zen. That's not how intuition is effectively used. Be the person who you have targeted and notice, simply notice. How are you? What are you thinking, feeling, hearing, tasting, smelling, experiencing as that person? So you take a moment to get to know you as your target. You know, what is the experience of being them? And then have them put yourself in your mind's eye. And not all of us are visual. Some of us just have to say, okay, this is what's happening. In your mind's eye, put yourself in front of you as that person. So you, the medium, are the person you've chosen to target. Okay, so put yourself in front of them. Now, as the medium, and here you are, this different part of you is in front of them. As the medium, notice what the person would need from you to respond in the way you want. Notice, and how do you notice? You allow the you've put outside of you to send, to do, to be different things, and you notice how the you who is your target responds. Sometimes it's helpful to take something like a bottle cap or a bottle and say, okay, this is me, and I, the medium, am the target I have chosen. So what do you do? How do you need to appear? What do you need to think and feel? What sensation do you need to offer to elicit the desired response from the other person? Often, if it's something you expect, it's not intuition. So allow yourself to notice, what is it that you have to do to elicit the desired response? Once again, document what it is you're perceiving, because it'll help you verify or disprove it, but it'll also help you employ it. It'll help you use it. Okay, well, I'm curious how that worked for you. And remember, at the end of any intuitive exercise, you go back to your mindfulness. Now, this is really helpful if you're going on a job interview or a date or an audition, because you can allow yourself to become the person, to become the interviewer. Don't make the mistake of becoming the company. You're interviewing to a person, not to a company. Allowing yourself to become that person, to notice who your market is. If you're a product, you can become your market. Notice, as your market, what do you want? How do you accept information? How can you hear or see what's being said in a way you desire it? So you can use your own perceptive mechanisms to then be able to evaluate a target, a prospective audition, a prospective business. You can allow your mediumship to give you the information you need to make shifts within yourself. It's not about faking it when you use mediumship, but if I, as a medium, see that an interviewer likes bright, flamboyant people and feels that they're more able to give the company what it needs at the moment, I might not wear a navy blue outfit. I might wear something different. And in the meeting, I might get validation that indeed that piece of information was correct. Again, the more you validate your intuitive information, the more your subconscious makes it available to you. I have found that truly brilliant products are intuitively positioned by the companies in very prescient ways. So a company experiences a need in a market, experiences how to sell and package, say, a better light bulb, and then uses mediumship's ability to move in time to see when I, the medium, as the product, if I move through my environment, when am I welcome? When is it easy for me to integrate, to have a place in my market? So, you know, all intuitive abilities you can play with, and the way to prove them, again, is by documenting them. I often say to my students, if I did for 25 minutes a day, everything I'm supposed to do for 25 minutes a day, exercise, meditate, breathe, blah, 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 I wouldn't have any time for basic hygiene and a day. You want to train these skills as you're using them to make your life easier or better, or it's just another thing to have to spend too much time on. And I think time is something that many of us are short on, and unfortunately it often leads us to make choices that aren't very pleasurable in our own lives. And of course, one of the things mediumship does show us about ourselves, our world, and others is, how do we experience more pleasure? How do we give more pleasure? How do we make a product more pleasurable? How do we make ourselves a more pleasurable package for a specific audience? Remember, what may be attractive to Joe isn't attractive to James, isn't attractive to your family. So mediumship does allow us to adapt ourselves or our product to the market. And we do that all the time. I mean, we do that in every situation. And even as simply as, how do I adapt more effectively to my day, to my environment? And that is, once again, you know, let's say I'm going to the office and I wear my new heels, but before I leave the house, using myself as a medium, I move myself forward in time and my feet hurt. And I find out that we're doing an on-site visit when I get to the office. Well, now I understand why I, the medium, decided to change out of my heels and into flats. So it is a really practical approach to being able to get information. And once again, it's not until you verify it that you get to see it. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I would like to help you adapt your mediumship to your particular needs. I'm still having a hard time distinguishing mediumship perceiving from just using my imagination, or is it the same thing? No, it is absolutely different. And in the moment, it's hard to distinguish one from the other, which is why you set up a framework for it. Today, I set up the framework of 1, 2, 3, begin. Often, if you're doing it at home, it's helpful to have some physical thing, like you tap yourself, or you rub your earlobe, or you put your thumb and forefinger together, something that makes the switch for you. And then it will still feel like imagination. But if you document your information and if you verify it, you will find over and over again that it actually isn't your information, it's data. I have been a practicing intuitive for 40 years. I work for Fortune 500 companies. I have made a big career out of it. And what I do is predict the future. When I'm doing it, it feels like imagination. They give me no information. I rattle off data. Much of it I get visually, so I don't even understand what I'm seeing. I'm hoping they understand it. And only with the passage of time is it proven that I am actually getting something that's correct and not something I'm imagining. I think one of the hardest things about training intuition is that often in the moment, it is a feeling of, oh, this can't be real because my senses are not, my feedback loop isn't what I'm used to. My senses are not perceiving it in a normal way for me, and I'm not getting immediate feedback. And one of the things that I train my students out of, and many of them are traders or doctors or mathematicians, and they don't have the results until the test comes in or the market opens, or the formula works, is document it, continue to document it, do it through noticing and not through thinking. And there is a difference, when you're imagining, you're creating. When you're intuiting, you're simply noticing. It's a different state. And often you'll find that your attention is actually here when you're imagining. And when you're intuiting, your attention is mobile and all over the place in a way that if you tried to really follow it, you'd experience as disjointed and confusing. But when you document it and then look at it, it actually makes a very detailed and complete picture. So let me see what other questions. Do you offer courses to learn to refine skills to be a business intuitive? Yes, I teach a training, which is really, really hard work. The next one is in September. So I teach a training a couple times a year, but also on Instagram at Laura Day Intuit, and on my website, which is lauraday.com. I put people together to read each other, because the hardest person to get an intuitive hit, an accurate hit on, is yourself or your own company, because you have too many ponies in the race. You have an emotional investment in the outcome. You have a lot of information. You have a lot of ideas, and all of that is counterintuitive. Whereas if you're asking somebody who knows nothing about you on Instagram, a complete stranger, and often I have people write down one target at home, please tell me about my target. And they say, well, you're thinking of making a move. I have a feeling that you're going to do it in the next few months. It feels like it's a very different kind of neighborhood, and all of it is correct. Wow, because they have the perspective. The reason I like to start people with mediumship is it doesn't take perspective. You are your information. Most intuitive functioning does require a somewhat dissociative look. So you need to be able to separate, or better yet, know nothing about your target. So I do offer courses. I do not take private clients anymore. So I only read my students in workshops, but I do have trained students, and I have a list of very good intuitives and business intuitives who I refer people to. I also think that, again, spirituality is a multi-billion-dollar business. I've written 6 books on it, where you train yourself, or you can do it with a group, and you can train in a group. But I think that intuition is best practiced in a company, the entire company together, different parts of the company reading each other, or in community. I really like the free, both financially free and open exchange of intuition. So I set up in my social media many different venues and formulas for performance for people to do this in community. And in boot camp, which is my training, it's always a group of not more than 50 people. And I've been teaching boot camp for 40 years, and they tend to stay together literally forever. Now that we have WhatsApp, I see what someone will text, where are my keys? And they'll get 5 answers from people in boot camp. And it's really wonderful, because it is, in a sense, the less you know about someone or something, the more easy it is to intuit, because you don't have all these preconceived notions. So let me see here if there are any other questions. And I also, on lauraday.com, there's a little thing that says contact Laura, and I answer all of your questions, not your intuitive questions, your questions about process. I answer those individually. So if you want to email me, I'm always happy to take your questions. Just make the email very short, because I'm the only one reading it, because people email me such private things. I do lives on Instagram all of the time at Laura Day Intuit. And on those lives, I have you, for example, write down a question at home that nobody sees. And then everybody, picks a person and does a reading without knowing what the question is. And that really gives you proof of intuition, because you see, oh my goodness, someone is very accurately and specifically answering my question. They have no idea who I am or what it is. I have a really bad headache now. Is that normal? So everyone is different with intuition. And a headache is probably more likely to be that you're a little dehydrated than that you're intuitive, than you're using your intuition. However, when you focus your brain in different ways, your brain often reacts, just like when you're hyper emotional, your brain and body and your neurotransmitters, they all react. When the weather changes, there's a reaction. So sometimes, especially if you don't usually use your brain in that dissociative way, in the way where your frontal lobe takes a little rest, or where you work around it, that sometimes can, give you a sense of spaciness or a headache, or sometimes it can make you feel very centered and happy. I can be in a miserable state about my own life, and a client calls me and needs a hit, an intuitive hit about something, and I'm out of myself and in their head. And when I come back to using my senses for me, I'm in a completely different state. So let me see how much time. We only have a few minutes left. Let me see if any of you have any questions. I really suggest that you do intuitive work with people you do not know. So, for example, if you want to know, or even to have a conversation with someone who's not talking to you, say to a friend, I want you to pretend you're Oscar and use the I. And I'm going to start a conversation with Oscar, and I want you to just be Oscar, and, just pretend it's happening. And what's happening is that pretending takes a lot of effort. Intuition doesn't. Intuition is really very immediate and integral to yourself. And that person, you can start with Oscar. Let's say you and Oscar had an argument. Oscar, I'm so sorry. What do I do to make this up to you? And Oscar Oscar will reply something. And usually the first minute is not, the person hasn't quite snapped into mediumship. But after about a minute, you'll see that you are having a real dialogue with Oscar. And then the verification is interesting, because often you'll get information you can verify. And often Oscar will call, because that connection is not made in a vacuum. Actually, in real time, you are communicating with, whether it's with another person or a casting director or an interviewer or someone you love but are not in contact with, and there is a dialogue. One of the things intuition shows us is that we are in constant dialogue with the world around us, with people around us, even with our own futures. And to refine that dialogue, to make it healthy, adaptive, and positively goal-oriented is a really important thing. So I have enjoyed speaking to you today, and I am very available. I do lots of free workshops on Instagram. I'm doing a Facebook Live little healing event on the 17th. I've written 6 books that are all workshops on intuition. The first one is called Practical Intuition, which was written 25 years ago. The latest one is called How to Rule the World from Your Couch. So I thank A Small World for hosting me, and thank you so much for your participation.